Hi guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. It's your tutor, Disha. Today we'll be working the Cape Communication Studies 2012 paper 1A. But first, a little housekeeping. I just want to send a special shout out to the students who consistently join the webinars every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. And you know the cliche drill. Like, share, subscribe. Stay tuned. Okay, guys, let's get right into it. Number one, Mr. David Henry is in charge of discipline at Kingsman High School. He realizes that a large percentage of the student population is sent to his office on a daily basis for not doing homework. He would like to research the reasons for the situation in order to assist the teachers and students in dealing with the problem of not doing work. And the first part of the question says, identify two methods of data collection that Mr. Henry can use for his research. And recall this topic in which we looked at the various methods of data collection. I'm talking about interviews, case studies, questionnaires, focus groups, observation, and so on. So two methods of data collection that Mr. Henry can use for his research could include questionnaires and interviews. Then part B says state one advantage and one disadvantage for one of the data collection methods identified in A above. So I'm going to select questionnaires. It could be economical for both Mr. David Henry and the student. It's easy and convenient in that there is no need to visit each and every respondent personally. Disadvantage, the information collected through questionnaires cannot be said to be very much reliable or valid. And in the case of you wanting to state advantages and disadvantages for interviews, you could talk about interviews allowing for more detailed questions and more detailed answers, and you could get a higher response rate from the respondents. And then the disadvantages for the interviews, there could be geographical limitations and it could be costly in the case of the interviewer and the respondent. Part C says identify one activity that Mr. Henry can engage in to ensure validity of the data. And recall, validity is the extent to which the instruments that are used measures exactly what you want them to measure. So what Mr. Henry can do is to ensure that he use a reliable method to investigate the reasons for the students not doing their homework. He could also ensure that his method covers all aspects of the concept being measured. He could also ensure that he worked with the population of interest. All right, number 2. Rhea and Mariah are conducting research on teenage pregnancy for their social studies project. They are discussing the sources that they can use for data and information. And here's the dialogue. Rhea, I discovered a website on teenage pregnancy in America. That is all we need. Mariah, that may not be adequate since we have to look at pregnant teenagers in the Caribbean as well. I suggest that we look at the local production of Teenage Mother on television. Sometimes there are interviews with actual teenage mothers on the television program. And then the corresponding questions are, in the dialogue, identify a primary source of data. So recall primary sources. Primary sources provide first-hand information or direct evidence concerning a topic under investigation. And then for secondary sources, they provide second-hand information has been already analyzed or interpreted. So from these definitions, we could say that a source of primary data from this dialogue could be the interviews with the actual teenage mothers on the television program. And a source of both primary and secondary information or data could be the website on teenage pregnancy in America. And then the following question says, state how the two sources identified in A above may be useful to the research. The students are studying teenage pregnancy in the Caribbean. So I believe the interviews with actual teenage mothers could provide first-hand information on how the teenage pregnancies is affecting the mothers, the society, and so on. And then for the website on teenage pregnancy, you might say, it's not important because it's in America. Well, whenever I'm researching a topic and I go to a website, I can find authoritative sources as well as I could find statistics that are relevant to the issue. And then the final part of number 2 says, identify 2 other sources from which the students may collect data for the research. And I add another one here. So I have diaries from teenage mothers, journal articles on teenage pregnancy in the Caribbean, and articles on teenage pregnancy in magazines and newspapers. Moving on to number 3, read the extract below and then answer the questions that follow. Tulwa asked Gobin if he thought Hulsharan would leave anything for Harry. Harry disappoint he bad, said Tulwa. Me can't tell you, Tulwa, said Gob. Only he lawyer can tell you what he left and what he ain't left. Tulwa glanced round again and then asked, why he didn't take Ramberry for his lawyer? Ain't Ramberry his son-in-law? Me can't tell you, Tulwa, said Gobin, fidgeting and frowning now. Adapted from Edgar Mittelholzer, Know Not Whom to Mourn, West Indian Stories by Andrew Salkley, Faber and Faber, 1960. And then the corresponding question says, from the extract above, give 3 examples of Creole structure that clearly contrast with comparable Caribbean Standard English structures. All right, guys, you have to be careful with this question and ensure that you don't just put down vague answers and not exemplifying them. So you literally have to select examples of Creole structures here in the passage and then contrast them with the Caribbean Standard English. And then the last part of this question says, suggest 2 reasons why the writer may have used Creole in the extract. Well, for me, Creole creates a sense of ethnic community and conveys the characters, for example, Tulwa and Gobin. I think the writer used this to add value to the language. Moving on to number 4, identify 4 challenges that native speakers of Creole may experience when learning Caribbean Standard English. Well, speaking from my perspective as an educator, there can be challenges to grammar. Students face challenges when it comes down to the grammar and the punctuation of the Caribbean Standard English words, in that it is different from the Creole. There can also be sociocultural challenges in the students coming out of their natural niche and going into a new Caribbean Standard niche. There can be challenges to the vocabulary in that Creole is more of a vocal language. When it comes down to Standard English, it's both written and oral. So there is a challenge to them learning new words. There's a challenge to the phonology, that there's a new system of sounds to be learned by the Creole speaker. B, your school has taken the step to teach some subjects in Creole, causing a public outcry. State one argument for the use of Creole and one argument against its use in teaching. And coming from my perspective as a teacher, when students use Creole in my class, it stimulates their learning, right? It is close to their identity and their feeling of self-worth. So I sense that the students are more happy when they use the Creole. It increases their motivation and enthusiasm for learning. And then again, Creole, think about it. Outside of this setting, where else can these students apply the Creole, right? It gets a bit more formal when they matriculate to places like universities and the workplace. On to number 5, read the scenario below and then answer the questions that follow. So guys, I did not use the actual past paper image. So if you want to view the actual past paper image, you can visit the past paper bank. But for the purpose of my channel, I opt to draw the image. Allow me to read what's going on in the scenario box. So in the first part, Barry is dancing and the lyrics coming from the speaker box says, "Fight down Babylon, woy, woy. Stand firm, young brethren, woy, woy." And then the second part here shows Barry's father reacting to the lyrics here. Barry's father says, "Barry, how could you listen to this? I don't understand a word." Moving back to Barry again. "But Dad, this song is very profound. It is saying that young men need to think for themselves and not blindly follow the established opinions of others." And then moving over to Barry's father. So Barry, "Well, why didn't he say it like that? Then it would be a cool tune." All right, let's move on to the corresponding questions. Suggest one reason why Barry understands the song and his father does not. Now, to understand this question, you'd have to revisit your textbook and read the chapter that speaks about registers, context, vocabulary, and jargon. We can see some Rastafarian jargons here. For example, "Fight down Babylon, woy, woy," right? Barry's father could not relate to that register or that jargon, right? And then part 2 says, Barry has been asked to give a speech to parents in his community to persuade them to listen to dancehall music. Name 2 forms of communication technology he could use to get their interest. Now, students, I want you to carefully think about this question because I've asked this one before and I heard persons saying pamphlets, PowerPoints, things like that. But you have to think about the definition of communication technology, in that it is the transfer of information from one entity to another through the use of technology, right? So Barry is using technology to get the message across that he will be having a speech on dancehall music. So for me, I would advise Barry to use radio or speakers, spread the message to the parents to spark their interest. You could send invitation or talk about the importance through social networking or blogging. So some of the parents could use social media so he could reach his audience through that. And lastly, he could use his phone to send text messages to probably his friends who have parents that would be interested in the presentation.